Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be telling you the eyeshadow palettes in my collection that I would get rid of over all the other palettes that I own from that brand. Does that make any sense? So say all my ColourPop palettes, which one would I be willing to get rid of if I was forced to? Not saying I'm actually getting rid of these. There is one in here that I'm really contemplating getting rid of and giving to my sister. But if I was forced to get rid of one palette from each brand that I have more than one palette of, these are the ones that I would choose. And I only have 7 brands that I have more than one palette from. So what I also did is I also threw in eyeshadows from all the brands I have bought single shadows from. Before I get started, this makeup look should already be up on my makeup Instagram account, which is Emily Catherine Beauty. Follow me there if you don't already, and let's just jump right into the video. So before we jump in, I want to tell you all the different brands that I have here spread out in front of me. I have e.l.f., Huda Beauty, ColourPop, Morphe, Anastasia, Beverly Hills, Urban Decay, Natasha Denona, and those are all the eyeshadow palettes that I have. But I have single shadows too, and I have Klarity Cosmetics, JD Glow Cosmetics, Lethal Cosmetics, Kristen Leigh Cosmetics, and Clionadh Cosmetics. I would also like to say that palettes and the shadows that are being featured in this video, I don't necessarily dislike, because I actually love everything, mostly everything featured in this video, but I just like the palettes that I own from each brand more. Does that make sense? I don't dislike these, I do like them. It's just I like the other things I own from ColourPop, ABH, Natasha Denona a little bit more, you know? I'm just gonna jump right in. So the first brand that we have is e.l.f. and I only have 2 palettes from e.l.f. and the one I would be getting rid of is my little e.l.f. bite-size carnival candy quad. And I think this formula is beautiful. e.l.f. has a really nice eyeshadow formula, but this color story to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we have these 3 pretty warm tones. This one's more neutral leaning, but this one is a very warm tone, basically terracotta shade, and I just find that it doesn't work well with this dark blue shimmer. When I use these 2 together on my eyes, it always ends up looking muddy just because they're completely contrasting colors, and for that reason I don't really find myself wanting to use this little quad. So this may be something that I declutter eventually, but the one thing that's holding me back is this blue. If I wanted to do a dark navy blue look, this is absolutely the blue shimmer that I would go for. It is so stunning. It is such a nice formula. It's just, it doesn't work the best with the other shades in this palette, but this shade is so pretty and it works really well, just not when used with the other shades in the same palette, which is kind of disappointing because, you know, when you buy a palette you want to be able to use the shades in the palette with each other. Personally, I don't want to have to pull out a completely different palette to use with another palette. I don't want to have to use a companion palette. I do have some that are companion palettes, but that's not always what I want, you know? Then we have Huda Beauty. Again, I only own 2 palettes from Huda Beauty, but I would have to get rid of the Amethyst Obsessions palette. I just dug my finger into the prettiest shade in the palette, and I dug it in there good. It is all underneath my nail. Oh my gosh. So now that we have repaired that, I would have to get rid of the Huda Beauty Amethyst Obsessions. I would have to get rid of this Don't Mind Brad cleaning up dog puke in the background. I have actually only used this palette once now. I have not had it very long, but the other palette that is going up against is just 8,000 times better. It's bigger. The formula, I would say, is pretty stable across the 2 palettes. They're pretty similar formulas, but just the color scheme of the other one gets me more, and I do enjoy this color scheme. It's just the other one I just like better. So while looking at my ColourPop palettes to pick the one from ColourPop that I would get rid of, I realized that out of the 10 ColourPop palettes that I own, 9 of them are collabs. I don't know what that says, but you know, so it just kind of broke my heart a little bit to have to choose this one. But again, I don't dislike this palette. I actually really enjoy this palette. It's just compared to all the other ones that I have, this is the one that I like the least, and even then, like, I don't dislike it. But that is the ColourPop X Sailor Moon Pretty Guardian eyeshadow palette. This got pretty negative reviews when it came out. Not a lot of people enjoyed this palette, and I think that's because you see some of these brighter shades in here and you expect it to really deliver a big punch of color, but that's just not what this palette does. Personally, I really enjoy a nice soft pastel like sweep of color over the lid. I love that look. I think it is beautiful. So this palette is just really good for me and my makeup preferences, but I can definitely see why some people wouldn't like it. That being said, I can achieve the same type of sweep of color on the lids with some of my other ColourPop palettes. So taking that into consideration, and taking into consideration that this formula, honestly, I think is different than a lot of the other ColourPop formulas. Like the pressed glitter in here actually, oh wow, the pressed glitter in here seems to have dried out a little bit, which I haven't used this palette in a hot second, but I did really enjoy this pressed glitter shade in here. I thought it was beautiful, but it's not really delivering the punch that it once did, but oh, that is still really pretty. And the Super Shock shadow in here called Silver Millennium is not what you expect it to be either. It doesn't deliver such a huge punch. It's that one right there, and for that reason, I just think that some of my other ColourPop palettes are better than this one. Next we have ABH, and this one was really difficult. This is just what it had to be. I only have 2 ABH palettes. I did have 3, but I decluttered Modern Renaissance like years ago, and I literally don't know why. I want to buy it again. But the one that I would have to get rid of is the Norvina palette. I really enjoy this palette, and I like this palette in theory. So the colors in this are beautiful. Obviously when it released, this is the shade that everyone would talk about. If you have a prior knowledge of the ABH eyeshadow formula in the like velvety palette like this, not the Norvina Pro Pigment Press Pigment palettes, not those ones, but the formula in these, you know that it's amazing. But something about this is just a little bit different. The mattes don't deliver as big of a punch as you think that they would. And that being said, I do realize that all the mattes really are lighter, and that this palette really would not work for deeper skin tones at first glance. But if you know the ABH eyeshadow formula, you know that the shadows really deliver a bigger punch than you think that they will. And so I was so excited for some of these tones, like this one called Soul, this one called Eccentric, and even this one down here called Passion. Honestly, all the shades, I was really excited for them because I thought that they were going to be beautiful, but they just are a little bit lacking. The mattes anyway. The shimmers, I think, are the standard ABH beautiful shimmer formula, but it's just the mattes are lacking a little bit something. And then putting it up against the other ABH palette that I own, this one would have to go. Next, we're moving on to Urban Decay. And I feel like if you know me and my makeup collection, you know that I love the Urban Decay Naked palettes. I have every single one besides the first 4. So I have Cherry, Heat, Honey, Reloaded, Ultraviolet. Okay, yeah, so those 5. I have owned every single Urban Decay Naked palette at one point in my life. And out of the ones that are still standing in my collection, if I had to get rid of one, it would be the Reloaded palette. So this one, I picked this one because of what it is trying to replace. So we all know that the original Urban Decay Naked palette was like everyone's favorite back in the day, when it's like 2012, 2011 YouTube standard, and I owned that palette and I loved it. I wore it to death. I don't even know where it ended up. I might have given it to my friend Maddie. Maddie, if you happen to be watching this, do you still have my Urban Decay Naked palette? I would be curious to know. They discontinued that palette, which I thought was such a shame because it was around a point where I was considering purchasing it again, but ultimately I decided not to. And then they released this to try to replace it, and they do have some nods to the original palette, like Barely Baked is kind of similar to Half Baked. They have Bucked, which is similar to Buck, that was in that palette. And they just have a few nods to some of the most popular and favorite shades from the Urban Decay Naked palette. But the thing is, nothing can replace that palette. That palette was such a cult favorite palette that even coming out with this, which is such a similar palette, like it really is such a similar palette, it just can't replace it. Like nothing can replace that palette. So out of the Urban Decay Naked palettes that I still have, this one would have to go because it just doesn't feel as unique as some of the other ones. And arguably you can say that no Urban Decay Naked palettes are unique, sure, whatever, but like this is truly a recreation of a palette that they once had before, and like none of the other ones are that. Next, we're going to move on to Morphe, and I have the 3 biggest palettes at Morphe, not like the biggest in size, but like the biggest impact palettes that Morphe ever released. Jaclyn Hill Volume 1, Jaclyn Hill Volume 2, James Charles Artistry palette, and then I have this, and I literally only bought this because it was on sale for like 17 bucks, and I was like, oh, what a steal, let me buy this huge palette, I'm gonna love it, I'm gonna get so used out of it. I used it like twice and a shade just fell out, so that's fun. This is the Morphe 39A Dare to Create palette. The shade just completely fell out over there. Let me just throw that back in there. I've used this like twice and I don't see myself really ever using it. I do think it's really pretty. Some of these shimmer shades down here, like some of these blues, I might like depot and throw into my singles palette, but quite honestly I think I'm probably gonna end up giving this to my sister just because I really don't use it. And compared to the other 3 palettes that I have from Morphe, this one does not compare. Like I would never in a million years get rid of any of those other 3 palettes, but this one, it could probably go missing from my collection and I would never notice, honestly. Next, we're gonna talk about Natasha Denona, and this one wasn't that difficult either. The one that I would probably get rid of is the Safari palette. Now, I do love all my Natasha Denona palettes, but this one seems the most dupable, and I actually watched a Khaki Reviews beauty video the other day comparing this one to the ColourPop at Forest Sight palette, and I didn't make that connection, but looking at them you can see that they're honestly pretty similar, and you can probably get some really similar looks from this palette. So while I can't see myself decluttering this anytime soon, I love having this in my collection and I like to play around with some all matte looks with it every once in a while. I just don't think I would declutter it anytime soon, but this is for sure the most dupable and like, I don't want to say lackluster, but the least exciting Natasha Denona palette that I own. So that is it for all the eyeshadow palettes. Now we're going to move on to single shadows, and my single shadow collection really is still growing. I only have like 5 or 6 shadows from each brand that I have single shadows from. So the first brand we're going to talk about is JD Glow Cosmetics. And if I had to get rid of one of the singles that I have from them, it would be Ruby. And I'm going to insert some swatches of these shades, some up close pictures and stuff, but I would get rid of this one because compared to all the other JD Glow singles that I have in my collection, this one is like nothing. It's like dirt. It is nothing. JD Glow Cosmetics single eyeshadows are so stunning and beautiful and impactful, and this one is the complete opposite of all of that. It has barely a shimmer to it. It's this weird, like really firmly pressed, like kind of putty formula, and like I feel like I really have to dig in there to get any sort of payoff, and it just doesn't look the best on the eyes, and I really regret buying this. And I was so excited for this because it is a different formula than the rest of the JD Glow singles that I have, but even like swatched out, like in the pan you're like, wow, that is a stunning bright red, and then swatched out it's like, where'd it go? It's so sheer. It's just not good. This is their Metalon collection shadow. Metalon? I don't know how to say that, but if I had to get rid of one of my JD Glow singles, it would for sure be this bad boy. And then we have Lethal Cosmetics. If I had to get rid of one of my singles from Lethal, it would be this shade Venom. This is like a really gorgeous like Bora Bora ocean water shade. It is so pretty. I love the color so much, but I have so many singles and just shades overall like this in my collection, and I wouldn't miss it if it was gone. Like, I think that the Lethal formula is really nice and pretty. It's very smooth, but also this one is kind of just lackluster. Like, it is absolutely a shimmer, that's what it's marketed as, but it just like basically has nothing to it. And again, I just don't think I would even notice if it was missing from my collection. This one was probably the hardest one out of all my single shadow brands to choose. This was the Clionadh single in the shade Alpine. This is, again, like the Bora Bora water bright teal turquoise shade, and this one is a little bit different because it does have a gold shift to it. You can really see it there, and it looks so stunning on the eyes. But compared to the other Clionadh shadows, this one, like, when it came down to it, I just had to make a decision, and this is the one that would have to go. And I again realized that these two shades are very similar, but I seriously feel like I have shades like this in almost every collection, and while this one is a bit more green and this one is a bit more blue, they just look basically so similar on the eyes that I don't think I would really miss it all that much from my collection. But wow, this shade really is so stunning. It's so pretty. I keep dropping. Then we have Kristen Leigh Cosmetics, and I love all the singles that I have from Kristen Leigh. The singles that I have from her were on a wish list of mine for such a long time, and they were the first brand that I bought single shadows from, so it was just like so exciting to me. And the shade that I would be getting rid of is this shade called Azalea, and it is a really gorgeous light pink shimmer shade, but it looks like almost every light pink shimmer shade in my collection. That's such an awkward place to swatch it. It is really a beautiful shadow. The formula is beautiful, but the shade itself is just not anything super unique to my collection, and I have that shade like 1,000 times over. The last single shadow brand is Klarity Cosmetics, and this one I'm going to have a really hard time holding up to show you because it is super broken. This is basically what I can do, but I will for sure insert some pictures. This is the Klarity Cosmetics single in the shade Aurora. Most of my singles from Klarity are very unique to my collection, and this is the only one that I could think of that I could find duped in my collection from like another brand, whatever. I have one that is very similar to it from Clionadh, and that's literally the only reason why I picked that one. I really love my Klarity singles. I actually have another one that is broken, and it is the shade Blush, so this is like my broken Klarity singles palette that I have here. But if I did have to get rid of one from Klarity, it would be that one, even though I love my Klarity singles. I think that they are super stunning. So that is it for this video. Again, all the decisions I made in this video were super hypothetical. I think that the only one I actually am going to get rid of is this big Morphe palette, just because I don't think I will literally like ever use this. I actually do have a shade in there in my upcoming project pan, so I may hold on to the palette through with that project pan, but after that I think I'm just gonna move it on from my collection, make room for some new stuff, and call it a day with that one. If you did enjoy this video, I hope you will give it a thumbs up and maybe even subscribe before you go, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye!